All right, so let's just pick up where we left off. So let's talk about what cognitive therapy looks like. So there are three main general groups of interventions. The first one is cognitive restructuring. So this is basically what we've talked about so far. You identify with the help of the client. Again, remember it's a collaborative process. And then you, again, with the help of the client, you try to come up with more realistic, more helpful thoughts, and you change them. So again, remember the focus is on changing cognitions, and that's why it's called cognitive restructuring. It's not emotional restructuring, it's not behavioral restructuring. Again, the focus is on thoughts, but the idea is that once you change thoughts, feelings, behaviors will also be affected. All right, the second one is problem solving. So this is about helping the client come up with a systematic approach to solving problems. Like you build up pros and cons. You again, with the help of the client, you help the client come up with steps that they can take to solve their problems, whatever they are. And then teaching coping skills is another one. A lot of times people with psychological issues, they are using maladaptive or unhealthy ways of coping with stress and with problems. A lot of times people use avoidance, and avoidance could have many different shapes, from substance use to just, sleeping it off and not like procrastinating. All of these things are different examples of avoidance. So you teach the clients how to change unhealthy or maladaptive types of coping to more helpful ways, such as basically facing your problems and coming up with ideas to change them. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a specific type of cognitive therapy, which is rational emotive therapy, developed by our friend Albert Ellis, who you met at the beginning of the lecture. Um, so the basic tenet of this theory is that, again, this is nothing new. I've already talked about this, but it's not events, it's not bad and negative events that cause unhealthy emotional responses. It is irrational beliefs. Um, it's a quote from Ellis: "Emotional upsets are caused by irrational beliefs." So let's look at what that means. So some examples of irrational beliefs. It is essential that a person be loved or approved by virtually everyone of their friends or in the community. A person must be perfectly competent, adequate, and achieving to be considered worthwhile. There is always a right or perfect solution to every problem, and it must be found, or the results will be catastrophic. I can't say that word. Catastrophic, I guess. Okay, you can watch a short clip of Albert Ellis here, which I highly recommend you do. Um, he's definitely a character. But okay, let's go back to the model, or let's look at the model here. There is the ABC model. It's very famous in the cognitive approach. So A stands for activating events. So something happens. B is the belief, how you interpret that event, your belief about what happened. And then C is your emotional or behavioral response, or emotional and behavioral consequences. So the idea is that A, the activating event, leads to a certain belief or interpretation, which is B. Again, it's not the event, but your belief about what happened that is going to cause the type of emotional or behavioral consequence. So let's work through an example. Somebody honks at you when you're driving. That's the activating event, right? So that's just stating the facts. You automatically interpret that as them calling you a bad driver, or whatever, a loser, or whatever, I don't know, however you interpret it. So this is now your belief and interpretation of this event. Well, if you feel like they're basically personally attacking you, you're going to feel angry or upset or, I don't know, sad. So that's the emotional consequence. Let's think about another way of looking at it, though. Again, same event, somebody honks at you, you just get out of their way and let them go, and you just tell to yourself that, oh, they must be in a hurry, they might be late for work, they might be having a bad day. You can imagine that that's going to lead to a very different emotional consequence than becoming angry. So that's basically the ABC model of the cognitive approach. Um, Stressors can predict distress. However, what really leads to distress is how you think about those stressors. So again, the focus is on your interpretation and your belief of what happened as opposed to the event in and of itself. Now, these beliefs and these interpretations, um, they get problematic, and when they lead to, you know, negative emotions like depression, anxiety, and we call these beliefs and these thoughts that are unhelpful, we call them cognitive distortions. These are ways of thinking that people regularly use to view life in an unreal and usually negative way. So let's talk about some types of cognitive distortions. First one is overgeneralization or black and white thinking. So the keywords in a statement, or when somebody makes an overgeneralization or black and white thinking, they engage in black and white thinking. The keywords they use or to identify that are never, always, all, every, nobody. So you're generalizing. Um, so example is that every child is a brat, is terrible. Um, Nobody likes me. And all those other, like, you can think about a million of those, but basically every statement that makes these huge generalizations. Inflammatory or global labeling, this is when you use um, one negative label to describe a whole individual. So when you call somebody stupid, for instance, or a loser, you're basically reducing the whole of that individual into that one label. And then the problem with that is that then you start interpreting everything that they do through that lens. So everything they do would become stupid in your eyes. Um, so example, yeah, that's an example of that. So name calling, basically. Okay. The next one is magnifying or catastrophizing. So this is like expecting a disaster to happen, thinking things are worse than they really are. The keywords are uh, things are awful, terrible, disgusting. So again, like I missed the bus. That means I'm gonna get fired. Uh, that's really terrible because then my life is gonna. I won't have money. My life's gonna be a mess. You know, you start like catastrophizing. That's basically what it is. Demanding, commanding is basically demanding that things turn out the way you think they should. So everyone should love me. Uh, the world should work the way I want it to go. Otherwise, it's horrible. Um, and I should be this way or that way. Otherwise, I'm a horrible person. Pay attention that in all those statements, I use the word should or must or have to, and these are the keywords to identify commanding and demanding. Uh, Albert Ellis actually calls it masturbation. So when you people who use must or shoulds a lot, um, so you're basically putting conditions for things to be certain ways. Otherwise, everything's gonna. Otherwise, you're a failure, or the world is a terrible place, or others are terrible. Common themes that you see with people who use demanding and commanding are people who are perfectionistic. Um, these are other examples that I already told you about. Okay, blaming is the next one. Now this is pay attention that blaming here is, the meaning is a bit different than how we use it. Uh, So blaming is when you take um, take blame or take responsibility for something that is out of your control. So people who over apologize a lot, even though something wasn't their fault. I think we all know a person or two that are like that. Even I feel like sometimes that way. Like I say, one of my New Year's resolutions was last year, I think, was not to say sorry as much. And I don't know, maybe I not saying sorry enough now. I've turned into an asshole. But I don't know. Anyways, yeah. So people who like always apologize, you can imagine how annoying that is. People who apologize for things that are not their fault. Mind reading is jumping to conclusion based on a single thing, um, and not considering alternative explanations. So you uh, come to class one day, good old days when we went to class, and I'm in a mood, and you just come talk to me after class, and because I'm in a mood, I act different, and then you interpret that as, oh, like he must think I'm not a good student, blah blah blah. So whereas you're not considering alternatives here. He might be having a bad day. He might be in a mood, whatever. So that's mind reading. Um, so how do you combat cognitive distortions? First of all, you want to be vigilant. You want to be on the lookout for them and try to identify what they are. Because a lot of times people and think about all these, like as you're learning about these cognitive distortions, think about which one of them you use the most. We all use them, but there are some that we use more than the others. So you want to first identify which one of these things do we, or do ourselves or our clients use the most. Then you want to come up with rebuttals. So think of a good way to come up with a rebuttal is to think of what a good friend would say to you, or what a compassionate mentor would tell you when you are using one of these cognitive distortions, like when you're catastrophizing. Um, Rebuttals, the good ones, are non-judgmental. They're specific to exactly what's happening. Like if I'm catastrophizing that I failed a course and therefore my life will be a mess, I'll be homeless. Well, you want to really focus on this one thing. Be specific about it, and then it needs to be balanced. You don't want to like paint a rosy picture. You remember that the idea is not, we're not replacing maladaptive thoughts with positive thoughts or with uh, rosy pictures. We are replacing maladaptive thoughts with realistic ones. And the realistic is very different than always positive and happy. All right, so we're at the end of the slides here. I'm gonna post a video of, um, it's a short clip from Seinfeld. I want you to watch that and try to identify as many cognitive distortions as you can in the video. I'm also gonna post practice examples um, that you can work through and work some, just like come up with, get an idea of what cognitive distortions look like in real life.